Hello, people. Hello. 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 You know what time it is? It's time for another book. This week, it's still our atrocious notepad. So we just have to suffer through this, or switch prematurely, which I'm not gonna do. This week, I went with Herodotus. Yeah, yeah, it's happening. The weird part about this one is it's one of these where I could have swore I already made the video. I'm already getting to the point where I'm forgetting what I've made. But I'm pretty sure I didn't make it. I'm pretty sure. In any case, I think it's like that because of the way it sort of sticks in your head. It, it sort of just lives once you've read it. It's kind of weird. Let's get into it. First, where did I hear about him? You hear about him, I have over time. Here, there, you watch this special or that. But then recently I was reading The Story of Civilization, right? Book 1, The Beginning. And he's a lot in it early on because he knows this. He's our source for these histories, right? I think Herodotus, was an old Greek guy. And somehow his writings have made it to us. So he came up in these histories, and I'm like, let me go back right, to the source and see what's up. A good note here. This bad boy's free. I think you could, of course, you can buy like a digital version that's real tight. Pay like $1. I don't know. Probably like $1, $2 maybe. But you can also find it free. It's definitely in the public domain. Like 3,000 years old. Who is this for, though? What is the rating? The rating is a 3 out of 5. It isn't typical, right? Because he's so far back. He has none of the culture of writing that we had, I would say. It's its own independent style, whatever the Greeks thought of, how they wanted to roll. So it's not going to be. You don't follow a character, kind of. There's no overarching story arc in that sense. Yes, it's history, but it's so old that we're bringing up the gods and like cyclopses and things like this. So it feels like a story, but he tells it like a history. It's its own little mix. So it's clearly not for regular people. It's not even for your average reader. Let's say you just like books. Just go ahead and enjoy the books you're reading. Don't worry too much about this one. You have to wait till it really sinks into your bones. But if you are deep into history now, not just like I only want, British history or, maybe if you just want European, it could work. But sort of a general, I don't mind what history comes at me, as long as it happened a long time ago. Those people will like this. But also, oddly, if you are a fan of Conan the Barbarian, and I'm talking the book, as well as the show. If you like the movie or the book, if you like the old Xena or the old Hercules TV show, this is Jason and the Argonauts, this kind of story, I think you will like Herodotus. Yeah, so it's a 3 out of 5. Sort of focus on those type of people. If you're not one of those types, big into history, or sort of really big into sword and board, as they say, then you could probably skip this and be all right. But if you like either of those, I think it'll be worth your time. All right. He the the way he writes this, it's sort of like spoken, if that makes sense. Like if you can imagine, it's back in ye olden time. We all show up to eat with the king, and the king points to Herodotus and like, "You're a historian, aren't you? From Greece? Tell me the history of the world." He would then stand up and start speaking this history. I can imagine in spots there might have been breaks. He just didn't write the breaks down because he didn't need interaction in his story. If that makes sense, I can almost feel it in spots. But I'm just going to start talking. I'm just going to tell you everything that I know. And so we'll be going like this, and then we'll divert, follow a character, right? So we come and we bring up a Darius. Then he goes back to like the beginning of Darius's family tree. Back to where even like those people came into existence. And we follow it up till we get to Darius, and then we might move on like that. We do this kind of thing. So it's a spoken type of a story. It's very interesting. Not a lot of not as many quotes, dialogue, scenes, not like that, not in that sense. And it's not long, it's two parts. It's in two volumes. I decided to put them all together, volume 1 and 2. But it's very dense, right? So, in a normal book, maybe not a good book, but even there are paragraphs maybe you could skip. Exposition, or I'm describing crap, or something like this. You can't really skip anything in the book. He every paragraph is trying to get across to you some kind of more than one thing. Be it somebody's personality, be it the situation, kind of this effect. I'm trying to think. It'd kind of be like if you're trying to tell the story of America, right? You could do a whole book on Washington or a whole book on Lincoln, but you're trying to tell this whole story, so you can't stop. But some things you have to divert from, right? And so you'll go, and then there was George Washington, and he did a great many things for America. And then you go on to the next thing that happened. Well, a great many things for America means all of his presidency, leaving after his second term, starting a farm, business and trade with other countries. He's just not going to put every detail in because he didn't have time, because he's sitting there talking it through. It doesn't stop. There are also parts where he'll backtrack, right? So this event, such and such person has died, and in his life there was this war. And when we sidetrack to this other person, we go back and then come through that same ground again. We see that same war from their perspective now. But then instead of, sort of following him, we move it along with them. So you'll go from you've conquered and you have all these slaves, and then you were free and now you're a slave and now you're free again. Right? They sidetrack, and then the next one comes, and the next one comes. Kind of like this. Alright. That's sort of how it goes. What we're dealing with, the history of the world that he knew was, they call it Hellenic. He was a Greek, so it's around the Mediterranean. Now, when you're reading, you have to, in your mind, realize that the map has changed. That the things you know and where that they aren't where they were whatever thousands of years ago. So if he says that they're Libyan, that might be Libya, but it might kind of be down more, off to the side, in name only. This kind of a thing. Because what happens? We had all these people around the Mediterranean, and then they were just starting to go to war, and people would move people around. So this group could go from here to there, and now that place is called what that place was. And then later they move them back. Capitals will move. This kind of thing. So we're going to have Hellenic. We're going to have Persians, Assyrians, barbarians. Barbarians are anyone not part of his group, meaning, you know, Corinthia, Nineveh, Persia, Babylon, Athens, Sparta. That's his world that he knows. He travels around trying to pick up as much knowledge as he can, and then he'll ask about what's past it. So what would be past it would be the rest of sort of Europe, but they don't know anything about that. They're uncivilized. They only know each other, so they just call them barbarians. Whoever the crap it is, wherever they're from, got to be a barbarian. Makes it fun. Fun things will happen. Ships will get blown just off to the side, end up in a new spot. Cities will be founded. Cities will get destroyed. This kind of thing. I'm going to just give you a sort of a taste. I mean, we're going way back. We have a guy named Croesus. There's a lot of names, and some of them are difficult to say. Just know that going in as well. He starts to try and, I guess, unify, conquer as much of the Hellenics as he can. He starts to do this, becomes powerful. Then a guest comes to his house, Greek person, and he's like, am I not the happiest man on earth? And the guy's like, I can't say that you are, because the story's not over. And he's like, what do you mean? He's like, you can have everything great, rich, powerful, but then in the last 5 years, all your kids die, all your money's gone, and you're horribly off. In which case, this happiness doesn't feel like anything because of this pain. Ergo, you're not the happiest man. He starts wars. He's talking to oracles. He ends up, of course, beaten in a war. Who did he fight? Who did he fight? I believe Cyrus. Cyrus the Great. He fights Cyrus the Great. Cyrus the Great beats him, kills all his people, about to burn them, and then he's like, I remember that. I remember what that oracle said all that time ago. Now, when I just said it like that, it seems obvious. But as you read Herodotus, it meanders off in such a way that you kind of forgot that happened. And so when you're re-reminded, it's like, oh yeah, it's not quite a moral, but we're so far back in history that the story that the moral came from was just a story then. You know what I mean? Got the king's name Midas somewhere out there. Midas's touch, this is where that crap comes from. This is the source. Like Phoenicians, phonetic. It came from somewhere. This is the source of that. And it is fun to read through. And it's fair, which you would think isn't. It's funny that someone so old, so far back in time, could give you a fairer history than sometimes you can get today. You read a lot of modern histories, and I get that you want some bias, But some people take it a little overboard. But he was like, who did he say? He'll go, the Persians say everything bad started this way. And there were certain Phoenicians that came over to sell their stuff. Ladies came to the dock. They kidnapped the ladies. One of them being the king's daughter, Io, daughter of Nachos. I thought that was funny. And they wouldn't give her back. And then so the other side then does the same on another port of the Phoenicians. And now they don't like each other. You keep stealing my women. Then he says the Phoenicians say it was not that way at all. The Phoenicians say she liked our captain, kind of got pregnant, and rather than go home and be in trouble, decided to go with us. Right? There's always two sides to the story. He gives both sides as best as he can, but then sometimes just disregards. He is just a human being. Right? Like, he goes, I went to this area, and further north than such and such river. I say such and such because the name is going to be a funky name. And it won't matter anyway because it's not called that name now. Anyway, I went to such and such river, and I asked who lives past there. And they go, if you go past those mountains, there's no one alive because you can't go past those mountains. It's blocked by snow. And then he's like, that sort of doesn't make sense because they're probably a little bit stupid. But I know that it couldn't have been snow. It's probably bugs. Probably a lot of bugs that keep people away. Right? He'll just lay a fact down as he sees it and then moves on, which is kind of funny. But these are rarer moments. I also wonder, like maybe I'm not giving Herodotus the credit he deserves. Maybe he had to talk this way to not get in trouble with, the authorities. We've seen that pretty consistent throughout history, too. Because there's one part where he says, one of the more outlandish theories is that the world is round, that the ocean goes all the way around. We know that's silly. And then other silly theories he doesn't put in. So maybe I'll give Herodotus more credit. Maybe he's sneaking stuff in. All right. I just came to that. I was just thinking that right now. There's a part where Cyrus the Great. Now, some of these, like, from history, if you read a lot of Bible, either just for your religion or for study, these names come up. Cyrus is in the Bible, right? Darius, I believe, is in the Bible. So it is a history, and you sometimes forget because he talks about, a flat earth, or the gods did this, or the oracle said that, and we all know oracles don't lie in this way. Right? You can easily get confused about about that it's real. But it is real. So at some point, Cyrus wants to fight Babylon. He has enough money. He's already rich, but it's like, bro, if you got to conquer, you got to conquer. A few interesting nuggets here. One, that two women at different times ruled Babylon. And that's what I mean. It's like, it's so far back, you would think, because in my head I did this a lot as well. I would see, if I see anything on the map about North Africa, if I see a Libya or a Babylon sort of in this zone, I think instantly Arab. But they weren't Arabs at that time, right? They were like Greek. So when I think Corinthia, that Athens had a war with the Corinthians, in my mind, that's somewhere up on the northern half of the Mediterranean, but it's on the southern half. It's in Africa. It kind of trips me out until I sort of nail it down in my mind. This book helps you to nail it down. So in my head, it's like I was, you would at first think two Arab ladies were running. I'm like, no, two Arab ladies weren't running. And two Greekish, Mediterranean style ladies were running Babylon. And you're like, does that matter? Everything matters in history. It starts to paint a kind of a picture, a thread that follows through. For example, I read a book about the Crusades. And when the Crusaders first showed up from France and from Germany and England, the Arabs' only concern were, are you Greek? And I thought that was weird, but then if you think about it, their history goes back past, obviously. And so their issues for the X amount of 100 years have been the Greeks. They haven't had an issue with these French people. Go do what you want, I don't care. What's it to me? But if you're Greek, I have a problem with you being here, and I don't want that. Right? So that you have the side conflict directly in line with what now is a new conflict, and then the waters get muddled. And then a new thing happens, and the same conflict is still in the back of people's heads. Right? So when you go back to the source, and you start to understand, maybe this is where their problems came from, right? You can keep track of it better. In any case, Cyrus has to cross a river. So he divides it up. He makes like 35 or 45 small channels, some large number like this, and diverts the river into the smaller channels so he can just walk across. That was pretty smart. He captures Babylon for the first time. We then cut to the Masagetai. I don't know. I'll look it up for our pictures, but I don't know where this is. But it's another lady ruler, which I thought was just interesting. Again, in my head, you get the idea that it's just women supplanted all the time throughout all of time. But it's not exactly the case. There are waves of it, right? We're not so modern in our thinking that, these thoughts haven't been thought before. And it's cool to see it sometimes. In any case, there's a queen, Tamiris. I think it's Tamiris. She sees him coming. She knows he's going to invade. So she, which is actually pretty smart, she sends him a letter. She says, you should be satisfied with what you have. You're already rich. But you won't be satisfied until you have, more blood shed. So if you come across this river, I'm going to give you the bloodshed you want, more than you can handle. Let's do it this way, though, since you won't go back. I'll back up from the river. You come across, we'll have it out. Or you back up. I'll come across. We'll have it out. In any case, it'll be done. What do you say? And you're like, again, a modern thinking is, I don't care what the enemy says, I'm going to do what I'm going to do. But I have to remember my modern thinking comes from, a study of war over humanity's lifetime. Cyrus didn't have that. He was way back in time. There weren't a lot of wars before him. He knows the most of war up to the point that he's at. And so he should have just done his strategy. Break the river down, move his army across, like he did with Babylon. But it's like you win so much, you get an ego. You can read that the man got an ego. And so he's asking people, what do you think I should do? And one guy's like, bro, if you go across that river, you could lose. But if you bring her across and lose, she'll just march right on your hometown. So it's safer to go across the river, but leave someone in charge back here. And the other guys were, of course, just go. You're invincible. So he goes, if I lose on my side and she goes right for my hometown, then the same applies if I win on her side. So I'm gonna go to her side, and that's what he does. He He goes across. He sneaks in. They add this. He goes in and he tricks some of the army and kills them and kills the lady's son, which just takes her off. And then she sends him a note like, "Look, it's your last chance to leave because I'm gonna go with the full weight of everything I got." And he's like, "Bring it." She brings it. He dies, and then she sticks his head into a skin of blood. Right? She gets like a water skin, fills it with blood, sticks his head in it, and is like, "Yeah, I got you more blood than you want now," which I thought was kind of gruesome, but kind of kind of metal. And our boy Herodotus says there are a lot of stories as to how Cyrus met his end. That's what they'll say a lot of times. Met his end. He goes, but this is the one I think is most true. Which I think is pretty cool. I know this is. I think I'm going to stop there. This is the whole book. This is how the book is. It's person after person. We follow him to his son Cambyses, and on we go down the line. We follow it to the Spartans, Athenians, right? Their war. I think they have a war against Cambyses. Wars against Persia. Wars against each other. Side stories. We have culture. At certain spots, he'll have a complete break and say, this is the culture of the people who live in Egypt. And he'll go on telling you numerous amounts of things. How they dress. Some of it, it will be, I would Google some of it, honestly. Because he's like, they dress like Phoenicians, but with hair like Egyptians. Now, to him in his time, that was all he needed to say. But to us, I'm like, I don't know what Phoenicians dressed like. It'd be like saying, yeah, he had like a Boston attitude, but dressed like he's from Utah. Like, who knows what that means if you don't know what Utah is? If you don't know what Boston is, right? He talks in this regard. Again, to save time, because he's got a lot to get through. But it's full, story after story. And you'll get lost when he takes a detour into some lineage and then tells the full story of that lineage, up to the point. You get lost in those side stories. Lots of fun stuff happens. And because it's Greek, it ends up being crucial to a lot of our literature now. A lot of our literature is based on the Greeks. So you will end up with the flavor, the source of these stories in your mind. And it'll just, like I said at the beginning, it lives in your mind. And you'll read another story and you're like, this reminds me of, and it'll come back. And so you might even read this and then have a better appreciation for modern things you're reading. Because if you didn't know this or didn't read this and your author did, and he put certain clues in, you might have missed those clues, which you will now grab because you have the source in your mind, if you know what I mean. And that's it. That's Histories of Herodotus. I strongly suggest it, again, for those two groups. If you like sword and board, if you are a history nut, everyone else can avoid it. I know this is a bit of a short video, but that's because it's hot in Texas. So, ad time. That worked out. Herodotus is fun. My book. This one is about... Well, I'll just go ahead and say it. This one is my version of a non-paradoxical time travel story. So if that sounds interesting to ye, go check it out. All right, people. I'll talk to you next week.